Greetings and welcome back to the Long War of the Chosen class guides. Today we're gonna look at the Templar for 1.2. Now I was actually struggling a little bit with this one, and because first of all most of my Templars look the same, so my experience playing with alternative builds is kinda limited. And also just because I think there's so much here which might be more to personal play style and not so much to, yeah, this kind of needs to be there to make things work. That there's going to be, it's probably going to be a lot of blue boxes in some of these builds. Also, like what I'm always looking for is for that talent row where, you know, you choose A, B, or C, and this is kind of what defines your build. And after much deliberation, I think for the Templar, it's gotta be the Warlock row. Because this is kind of the build-defining thing. If you go for Crusader's Rage and going for a more tanky approach, if you go for Arkwave and go for, you know, a little bit glass cannon damage dealer, or if you go for Superior Aptitude, which is probably the best one in terms of focus generation, and want to do a lot with your focus, like more of a kind of utility kind of approach. My other thought process was instead of having it centered on this row, more looking at, okay, which is your focus generation skill? Are you going for aptitude? Are you going for channel? Or are you going for indomitable? But I think there's some more flexibility there. So let's stick with this approach of having 3 different builds based on what you pick on the Warlock rack. And we're going to start it off with the one that I've never played, and I'm still not convinced that it's particularly good. And that is the tanky build. So we're talking about Crusader's Rage. Now, when we're talking about the technical, I kind of shit a little bit on Crusader's Rage, and saying it's a terrible perk that does nothing. Now, I think I still stand by this statement for the technical, because you know, in a shooty build you want to deal damage, and in order to trigger that damage dealing effect, you need to take damage first. Now I think for the Templar you don't really care all that much about the damage boost. The reason why you take Crusader's Rage is to reduce the wound recovery time by 6 HP. So the first 6 hit points of damage you take don't matter. Like, you're not gonna get injury time, you're ready for the next mission right away. And if you have a character that is supposed to tank, is supposed to take some hits for the rest of the team, I think that's a very important talent to have. The risky part is, of course, you know, making sure you only take 6 HP most and not 7, 8, or oops, there's a bleed out. So I guess one of your safety nets, and one of the reasons why I then put this as one of the core picks here, is then sustain. You know, first of all, you get a further 2 HP of wound recovery time reduction, so now you have 8 HP of damage that you can be ignored. And you know, if you get a little bit more heat than you like, then you get that guaranteed bleed out from sustain. Also keep in mind then, you know, so we can stack the 6 points of wound recovery reduction from Crusader's Rage with the 2 points here, and if you then also, you should have then a specialist officer with field surgeon, or anyone else who can pick up field surgeon as an XCOM row perk. I think that's available to some. Because all of that stacks, so then you have 9 hit points of wounds that you completely ignore. That is pretty close to all the wounds you can ignore. So the next step then would be, okay, so if your plan is to basically occasionally or more often than not probably be either in low cover or actually out in the open, having your Templar shield up with a lot of ablative and getting shot at, then of course your additional focus generation from indomitable seems like a really good choice to get more focus each turn. So your turns will probably look like, you know, with that extra focus you might then volt something, attack something in melee, and then shield up again. or use any other like skill that your focus points allow you to use. So Indomitable, getting some extra focus generation that way, like you want to be hit. The downside of Indomitable is, of course, you need to leave enemies alive to shoot you to get that extra focus. This is from ranking these kind of skills. Superior aptitude for focus generation is just automatic. If you get you always get 2 focus instead of 1 focus for your attacks. Channel is you need to kill something and get lucky, and then also pick it up, move there to get the focus. And Indomitable is you need to leave something alive, hope that it shoots your Templar and doesn't shoot somebody else, and then you get the focus. So it's not as reliable, but if your job is getting shot at anyway, then this is your approach. And then finally over here, I think impact compensation to kind of avoid these situations where you get bursted down through the 9 points of wound ignoring. The damage reduction debuff is fairly significant, and unless you have one big attack, you don't want to tank multiple sectopod shots, but if it's like various advent troopers shooting at you, you can probably reduce their damage significantly with this. Now, as for the more flexible perks, now you might say, okay, something like Brawler, again, another damage reduction, and something like Fortress are all definitely tanky perks, and I think they are strong picks for the tank build, but I also think that their alternatives in their row are so strong that I would consider them. Mostly Stun Strike and Void Conduit. You hopefully have some extra focus to spare, and that's some really good utility. Like stunning an enemy is really strong. A Void Conduit is limited to humanoid enemies, so has a little bit more of a limit than Stun Strike, but it has the bonus of, first of all, it's a void prison, so right, something like an elite priest. Mental immunity doesn't remove the stun effect, right? There's no defense against this. It doesn't have a hit chance. Stun Strike, I think, starts at an 85% chance to hit, plus 5% per focus level that you have. I think something like that. So you can actually miss, and I've definitely missed my 95% stun strikes before. So this is guaranteed. Now, where Void Conduit really shines is against generals on HQ assaults, although you is the Templar might not be the best candidate for an HQ assault to begin with. And then the avatars. Now you only fight 4 avatars in the campaign, and you probably won't have the cooldown available for the second one in the final mission, but the first and the third one, you can trap them and then they don't teleport around when you hit them. That alone is fairly strong, depending on how much you usually struggle with the avatar teleportation. If you consider the final mission a victory lap anyway, then of course Void Conduit might not be that convincing argument that I'm trying to make here, but it's still it's still a way to take any sort of humanoid enemy out of the fight. Alright, and then finally here in the final row, I think for all of the specs, I'm gonna go with, yeah, whatever you want. With I think with the tank build being more a damage avoidance or taking damage away from your team kind of build, I think probably Ghost would be the first choice here. Because it's basically a mimic beacon, right, that can do a little bit of damage or can distract some enemies. So it kind of fulfills your role as tanker of keeping damage away from the team. There's definitely something to be said about just going Apotheosis, because it's just so much additional damage that you do, so your contribution to the team is going to be higher. But again, if in a sort of tanky setup, I think the actual damage output might not be that important. Again, this is all, I'm going to say that again, I've never played with tanky Templar, so this is all a little bit based on what I've heard other people say and also what I assume would work. The reason why I don't play with the tanky Templar usually is because I don't believe that you can reliably make enemies shoot the Templar. I've tried a little bit of a tanky build, and even though I had my Templar out in the open without any cover, just shielding up, enemies were still taking shots of my other soldiers that were like in low cover or something, simply because they saw a chance to get a kill on that other soldier while the Templar was standing there with lots of hit points, lots of ablative, lots of dodge. And so they said, oh, screw that, I'd rather try my luck at maybe one-shotting that specialist that's there in low cover. And if my tank is not reliable, there's no taunt in this game, right? We're not playing World of Warcraft here. So if my tank's not reliable, then I don't want to build around the tank. But that's just personal preference, right? That I'm not saying it can never work. Maybe that's something I need to learn how to position my tank to make them really the most attractive target, or maybe, I don't know. Anyway, enough about this. Let's move on to one of the other approaches here. Alright, so moving on to what I would call the utility Templar. So with the core perk here being superior aptitude, which is, I would say, the most reliable way to get additional focus, and you want to have abilities to bring your focus to good use. So we have the previously mentioned Void Conduit here as one of your the control options, and then of course you probably with that extra focus are going to be using your Volt fairly often, so increasing the radius and giving it a chance to panic enemies seems like a decent choice there. In addition to that, you have a couple options again. Pretty much I think the primary pick on a utility would be Amplify. 50% additional damage for the next 3 attacks is exceptionally strong. It's fantastic, especially against the Assassin, where you want to get as much damage in with as few attacks as possible, just so to give her fewer reactions. But I guess for all the chosen, right? 50% damage boost is really great, also for all the alien rulers. And on many other big enemies, 50% is a big number. 90 is a big number, and it's based on the next 3 attacks. There are some multi-shot attacks that count as 1 attack. Most importantly, Fanfire should only count, for example, as 1 attack. So if you have somebody with strong pistol skills, let's say a shooty shinobi who has a flank shot also with Hunter's Instinct, all that good stuff that increases his base damage. And then he fanfires somebody with Amplifier on them. That's a lot of damage that comes together there. Alternatively, because I like Invert, I have a box here at Invert. If you don't like Invert, ignore the skill. I just think it's a unique ability that nobody else gets, and that opens up some very interesting gameplay, and I still am very sad every day I think back to the days when we could invert on the Chosen. But I guess somebody did too many mean things to the Chosen with that, and that's why it got removed. Well, that was, I hope you're happy now. Anyway, then here, of course, Stun Strike, we talked about it a little bit before. Good ability to stun an enemy, which I think would be the primary pick here for this kind of Templar. I did a box around Soul Shot, although I'm not a fan of Soul Shot. It kind of feels like you're giving up probably a focus for not much damage. You're probably better off, especially once you've picked up Terrorize, better off volting with that focus, or just running in melee and generating focus. I tried it one, like it has fantastic animation. I wish it was a better skill. I wish I could use it more often because I really like the animation, but I don't think it's particularly good. But it's an option. It's an option, especially if you think you don't need the additional CC from Stun Strike, because the rest of your squad provides that. If you have a lot of maybe a lot of psionics, maybe a lot of support grenadiers with sting grenades, then maybe you're good on stuns, right? But yeah, then we've got the disciple rank. Overcharge, you know, since you're generating a lot of focus, getting extra chance to crit and hit for your melee attacks is just a flat out damage increase. And then there's Pillar. I have a special something for Pillar. I think I try to take it as often as possible, and I pretty much every time I play a new campaign, I still find a new use for Pillar that I hadn't considered before. And I don't see many people playing around with their Pillar, I think there's, in my opinion, this ability isn't, let's say, solved yet. I think there's still a lot of ways to use this skill out there to discover, and that's why I kind of want to keep using it to find more unique ways where you can say, oh, yeah, that's an interesting option. And again, similar to Invert, it's like a unique skill only the Templar has, and you know, new buttons that do new things kind of trigger my happy thoughts. So yeah, that's my thought on Pillar. I like some Pillar play. I guess you could also just take Sustain, you know, to have a little bit more survivability on your Templar, but I'm not a fan of skills that where you take the skill and then you hope it never gets becomes active during the whole campaign. I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, and it gives you the 2 HP wound reduction. You know, I give it that. So yeah. And then, yeah, your master rank. Up to you, I would say. You can, of course, I guess the problem is a little bit with apotheosis. You know, you waste or you give up all your focus, then you can't actually volt anymore. You can't take advantage of the increased damage and increased AoE for your terrorize volts. But I guess the same is true for all of these skills. They all kind of drain your focus. So a lot of the choices on the Templar will be influenced a little bit also by what you pick up on the XCOM roll, and a little bit by what kind of stats you have. So I think like the tanky build probably works, can take more advantage of low mobility stats, while any sort of build that relies on melee really wants higher mobility. This kind of build, this utility build with focusing a little bit more on volts and then potentially just, you know, picking up overcharge for the aim bonus, can get away with maybe lower aim because it doesn't rely on its melee attack to do damage, and you know, volt is an automatic hit. A lot of things to think about there in that regard. But again, we also, when we are talking about the XCOM perks, we're going to look at some stuff and see what kind of direction it pushes us a little bit in. Like in this case, to just throw it in between here, with Blade Master in the XCOM row, I would strongly consider an Arkwave spec. So let's not just consider it, let's look at it. Alright, talking about the Arkwave build, and this has been lately my kind of favorite way to play the Templar, because you can do some fancy stuff with Arkwave. And of course then Arkwave is one of the core perks here, and I also say Channel would become one of the core perks, because I'm convinced you need some additional level of focus generation in each build, and obviously you can't get to aptitude, and I'd say Indomitable is a little bit too unreliable. Keep in mind, channel is when an enemy dies, is the effect here. It's not an enemy that you have to kill. Anyone in your squad can kill them. Hell, you can, you know, if your specialist Trojan hacks a drone and it dies from the Trojan damage, you might even be able to pick up some focus while you're still concealed. So channel is then the option for some additional focus generation. If you're unlucky though, you're sitting there dry and no additional focus point drops on the whole mission. So it can be frustrating at times. Then, since I kind of say the gameplay loop is a little bit focused around once you reach Master, to get enough focus to trigger Apotheosis, which will buff your damage dramatically, and then that damage increase applies to every target hit by your Arkwave. So I don't think you want to be spending focus too much on other stuff. So I'd say Terrorize is kind of out. I don't want to be vaulting stuff. I want to, you know, sit on my focus and gather it for Apo. So I might as well take Bladestorm. Alright, and then when we're talking about the base 3 ranks here, kind of very similar to what we talked about on the utility builds. It makes a lot of sense to go for overcharge. You know, additional aim and crit chance based on your focus. You are basically living for you're there for your melee damage, for your Arkwave damage later on. And fairly certain this additional aim and crit chance applies to all targets hit by the wave. So you have to actually roll a hit roll for each target. So it is definitely the strong perk. I just, you know, I like my pillar, as I talked before, and that's why I still keep a box here. You can't make me stop, but definitely, you know, if you want the most effective Arkwave destroyer of enemy groups, take overcharge. Then a little bit utility with Stun Strike, although, you know, ideally, especially late game, you want to hawk that focus to trigger your Apotheosis. But eventually, that's going to be on cooldown, and hey, what are you going to do while you wait for it to stay off cooldown with the extra focus you had? Yeah, occasionally Stun Strike a target. I guess Soul Shot is for the rare occasion where you can't reach the enemies. So maybe it's an option, but I still think it's a weak investment of your focus points. And if you can't reach your enemies reliably, then maybe you want to invert into them rather. And then you're in a good position to Arkwave a bunch of guys, or just invest more into your speed of your Templar, into your mobility. And yeah, on the starting row, invert allows you really to get in there. It's a high risk, high reward play with Arkwave, right? You gotta line it up, and that you can actually hit multiple targets, and you can sometimes achieve that by, you know, maybe even inverting an enemy into a position where they're now grouped with somebody else. Alternatively, Amplify is just really, really strong, as I just said. That being said, you kind of don't want to use your focus once you reach Master, and, you know, it's all about the Apotheosis play. But it's a long road until you get there, and having focus, having Amplify to help you kill some big enemies might be an interesting pick. For me personally, as I like Invert, as I like Pillar, I'm more like a top row here on this choice, but I think the stronger pick would probably be Overcharge over Pillar. I think Invert is better than Amplify for the real Arkwave value to get into position. Kind of depends a little bit also on your character's mobility. You know, Invert is of course stronger on low mobility Templars that need the teleportation mechanic to get in there, that might not be able to reach anything. Alright, That all being said, let's head over to the wiki, take a look at the various XCOM perks and how they may or may not influence our decision making on what kind of approach we take when speccing the Templar. Alright, so here we are with the XCOM raw abilities that the Templar has in the base game. And the most important thing here to point out is that when you look at these abilities, look very, very closely if they apply to the skill that you want them to apply to. So, biggest example being something like Predator here, where you think, oh, 15 bonus aim and crit, yeah, but it's for your ranged attacks. So this would apply to Soul Shot and pistol skills. Not apply to any melee attacks or Arkwave attacks or anything like that. Similar to open fire, ranged attacks, etc. And also, if I'm not mistaken, center mass. Do an additional point of damage when using guns. On the other hand, something like lethal says it increases the damage with your primary weapon. A primary weapon for the Templar is the gauntlet. Anything you do with your gauntlet, rend attack, arcwave attack, volt even, and psionic storm, they all get the bonus damage from lethal. So that's definitely, in terms of damage increases, one of the best perks you can pick up. Alright, and then, of course, if you go for any, let's say with the Arkwave build, I mean, Templar is always going to be melee focused and always going to like melee builds, but especially something like Arkwave will be very likely to pick up something like Blade Master or Cutthroat. Right? This is boosting your melee attacks, giving additional aim, extra damage, ignore armor against biological enemies, crit chance, and then also bring them on, increases crit damage for your primal weapon, so for your gauntlet attacks. Now this, of course, the only way you can crit as a Templar is with your melee attack, and then you probably, definitely, absolutely want overcharge. If you have bring them on in your XCOM roll, and overcharge, because otherwise you just have the base crit chance, whatever the Templar gauntlets have, 10%? Not 100% sure. Unless, of course, you have something like aggression, increasing your crit chance, also for melee attacks. So there's a lot of stuff here that you can benefit on the melee build. What else is worth pointing out? Lightning Slash. Attack an enemy in blue move range with your weapon. This is nice, as an additional way to get an attack in, but it is not a rend attack, so you're not gonna get focus generation from this. Just keep in mind, it's easy to think that if the Templar attacks with melee, they get focus. No, it needs to be rend, the ability to generate focus. Lightning Slash doesn't do that. It's still a decent perk. If you have it in your tier 4 row, if you have the AP to spare and nothing else is there, then it's definitely a good pickup. For the tanky side, there's a lot of tanky perks here. Survival Instinct, a little bit double-edged sword, because it gives you additional defense, which makes you as a less likely target. So if you're going for the tanky build and your goal is to take the shots for your team, having additional defense might be not ideal for that. On the other hand, Infighter or hard target, just increasing your dodge, so you take smaller hits that you can also reduce with the damage reduction. You're stacking damage reduction. That's kind of a good start. Similar here, Fortify, getting additional defense. Terrible pick in that case. At least as I understand, as a tank build, you don't want defense because you want to get shot at. Right. On the other hand, Zone of Control reduces enemy aim instead of increasing your own defense, so you're still probably going to be the most likely target, so this is kind of nice to get in there and tank in the enemy faces, right? Especially then that probably incentivizes you to actually get in the middle of the enemies and then picking up Brawler on your main tree for the damage reduction from close range attacks. Stacks nicely with it, because with the reduced mobility, enemies also might have a hard time getting out of your close range area. So something like Zone of Control, Brawler, and Infighter combos all nice for I want my Templar to be in the thick of things and not just standing somewhere out in the open taking shots, but rather being close to enemies. Keep in mind though that, of course, if you're super close to enemies, they have a higher chance to hit you because of close range bonuses, and they probably will be able to flank you. So, you know, just some things to keep in mind. So I think any sort of... we didn't talk as much about equipment on most classes as I probably would have liked, but I think for the Templar it's very important for any of the specs to equip the vest with crit damage reduction, or crit chance reduction rather. Of course, the best item that gives you ablative. And then for the third slot, I really like a mind shield, because you are very, very limited if you're disoriented. And so avoiding disorientation, panic, stun, etc. with a mind shield is kind of a good choice. One alternative is, of course, to simply go for an empty slot for additional mobility, because, you know, as a melee class, or mostly melee class, you live and die with your mobility. Which also makes something like combat fitness a decent pickup, depending on the rest of your XCOM. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I don't see too much use when we're talking about XCOM raw perks for anything grenade related, you know, be it rapid deployment, full kit, smoker, salvo. I don't think that's usually what you want to spend your actions on. Like, if you have focus, you want to spend your actions on probably using something, you know, like a Volt and then attacking. Or if the enemy's too far away, you need both actions to attack anyway. I don't see me carrying grenades on a Templar, ever. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the other thing to maybe watch out for, something like coup de grace. It's kind of always a niche talent. You know, if you have in your squad lots of psionics or lots of support grenadiers that can apply disorient, or panic, or stun to enemies, then hey, you get a nice little damage boost against them. But I don't think that's a perk that kind of defines the way you want to play. Right. I think that's all I want to say about the XCOM raw perks. And with that, we're gonna put a cut in here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for keeping the comments coming on the previous guides. And yeah, a few more classes to go. I'll see you next time.